You're listening to
Killer Communications,
brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons,
DNA ID,
Citizen Detective,
Campus Killings,
Scene of the Crime,
Zodiac Speaking,
and
Beyond Bizarre True Crime.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
In the fall of 1989, 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic went missing after getting a call from an unknown man on the family's home phone. Her bike was found at her school, but she never came home. Later, Amy's body would be found dumped, and her community devastated by her brutal abduction and murder. Nearly 35 years later, her case remains unsolved, and Amy's killer is still free. As a trigger warning, this episode will describe a brutal assault and murder of a child. Please use extra listener discretion for this case. Chapter 1. The Call. In early October 1989, 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic was inside of her Linford Drive home in Bay Village, Ohio, after school when the phone rang. She picked it up, and a man on the other end of the line claimed that he was friends with Amy's mom, Margaret, and he knew that she'd just gotten a big promotion at the magazine company she worked for, Trading Times Magazine. Because her mom had recently been working a lot of extra hours at the magazine, Amy likely felt that her mom was indeed getting a promotion. So when the man said he needed Amy's help to buy her mother a celebration gift, she enthusiastically agreed. It probably helped that the man promised Amy a little gift for herself for helping him out. But one condition was she'd have to meet up with him at the Bay Square Shopping Center, not far from Amy's home, on Friday, October 27th. Amy agreed, and since it was supposed to be a surprise for her mom, she never said anything to her parents. On Friday the 27th, Amy was seen leaving school on foot at around 2:30 p.m. Amy and her older brother Jason often walked or biked home from school by themselves, and then called their parents to let them know they'd arrived at home. Jason made it home at 3 o'clock, expecting his sister to be close behind him. But by 3:15, Amy wasn't there, which was incredibly odd. Jason immediately called his mom at work, but Margaret wasn't too concerned, because Amy had said she was trying out for a choral group at school, and was probably late because of tryouts. While Amy's mother would later tell the media that she had a very bad feeling, even though she told her son Jason not to worry, she hoped deep down that the choral tryouts were indeed the reason Amy hadn't gotten home. And to Margaret's relief, she received a call from Amy at around 3:40. But the usually talkative fifth grader only gave Margaret one-word answers to the questions of how school had been and whether or not Amy had gotten into the choir. It seemed weird to Margaret, and after she hung up the phone with her daughter, she couldn't let go of the nagging feeling that something was very, very wrong. Chapter 2. Missing Child. Margaret left work immediately, hoping and praying that Amy was just in a bad mood or upset about a bad choral audition, and would be waiting to unleash all of her 10-year-old emotions on Margaret as soon as she walked in the door. But only Jason was home when she arrived at around 4:30 p.m. Margaret's heart sank when she learned that Amy had never come home, and the call to her work from Amy hadn't been made from the family's home phone. Margaret jumped into her car and anxiously drove to Bay Middle School, hoping Amy was still there. When she arrived at the school, she found Amy's bike still chained to the bike rack, but there was no sign of Amy. Margaret later told the media that seeing the bike alone there was all she needed to know that her daughter had been abducted. She drove directly to the local police and put in a missing persons report for Amy, explaining the strange phone call from her daughter and that Amy had never made it home from school. Though Amy had technically only been missing for about an hour based on Margaret's last phone call with her, police took the case seriously, putting out a police bulletin at 5:15 p.m., alerting all surrounding agencies of Amy's potential abduction.
I have a call back for 86 in 2 seconds. Negative, K, nothing further, just see the cabbie on the corner.
By 6 p.m., police swarmed the Mihalijevic residence, just as Amy's father, Mark, arrived home from work. Upon being told that his daughter was missing, Mark took the police over every inch of the house and yard, hoping for some clue as to where Amy had gone or who might have taken her. As word spread through the neighborhood that Amy was missing, friends and family joined the search, going through the town and even the ravine that bordered the highway, but their efforts didn't produce any sign of Amy. By the second day of community searching, local police contacted the FBI as well as neighboring police departments and highway patrol, but there was still no sign of Amy. Chapter 3. A Targeted Victim. The lead FBI agent on the case happened to be a neighbor of the Mihalijevics. Agent Dick Wren lived in Bay Village not far from Amy's house. He had children around Amy's age who went to school with her, and he knew the area and the residents there well. His familiarity with the town and rapport with the people that lived there was a boon for the case, and after Wren spoke to one of his neighbors, he got a huge clue. The neighbor's daughter was a classmate of Amy's and had information that she thought would help. The girl told investigators that Amy had been telling friends and classmates about the strange man who had called wanting to get her mom a promotion present. Based on corroborated stories from several of Amy's friends, this man had not just called Amy one time, but several times over the course of a few weeks, all in an effort to set up a meeting to buy this gift. From Agent Wren's perspective, this gave several insights into who Amy's abductor was. He'd known enough about Amy's family to have given specific information to make Amy believe him, including knowledge of where her parents worked. He also not only knew her phone number, which could have been looked up in a directory, but he clearly knew the area where she lived to have offered up the Bay Square Shopping Center as a meetup spot, which was a walkable distance from her school. The fact that he called her multiple times when neither of her parents would have been home also meant that he knew her patterns, and that she and her brother walked home from school and would be alone for several hours before their parents returned from work. This hadn't been an abduction of opportunity or a random incident. Amy had been targeted, lured, and snatched by a very calculated assailant. The question was, who was he, and where had he taken Amy? While Agent Wren had no evidence yet, he at least had a place to start: the Bay Square Shopping Center. Hundreds of shoppers were interviewed to see if anyone had seen Amy, and to Agent Wren's great luck, many people had. Two of Amy's classmates told Wren that they were at the mall on the 27th, and they saw her waiting on the curb outside one of the businesses. After a few minutes, a white male who looked about 30 approached her, put his hand on her shoulder, and guided her through the parking lot around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This meant that the call Amy had made to her mom at 3:40 was after she was already with her abductor. Based on knowing the kind of perpetrator they were working with, Wren later told the press, "We knew if we didn't find her quick, it was clear we were dealing with a crisis situation." Chapter 4. Ohio's largest missing person search. Only 15 hours after Amy went missing, flyers with Amy's picture and the details of her abduction were hung in hundreds of locations around the Bay Village area, and by the next day, thousands more had been shipped to every town within the 3-state radius in case the abductor had left the area. The entire town of Bay Village mobilized at the police station, handing out flashlights for night searches, and over the next several days, hundreds of people from the surrounding areas joined the search, and search dogs scoured several areas. There were so many volunteers, the top floor of City Hall was converted into a command center to handle the influx of donations that included meals for the volunteers, financial assistance for search equipment, and the media outlets wanting to get in to cover the case. As the volunteer director Howard Kimball told Cleveland Magazine, People were so good, so amazing. A printing company donated all the print work and insisted we never mention their name. The airlines, the TV stations, restaurants, we asked for paper, and so much came in one day, we had to move it to the fire station. Volunteers searched for months, from the night of Amy's abduction, all through the fall and into the winter, while federal, state, and local law enforcement clocked over 60,000 hours chasing down 8,000 tips and leads. They interviewed thousands of people to build a profile on Amy and who her abductor could have been, and they whittled down a suspect pool to 120 people of interest. Between the police and volunteers, 2 million copies of Amy's missing poster were distributed across all 50 United States, as well as parts of Europe and Australia. The search to bring Amy Mihaljevic home is still the largest search for any person in Ohio's history. But unfortunately, for all the tenacity of the police and citizen volunteers, Amy's story would not have a happy ending. On February 8, 1990, over 3 months since Amy had been abducted, a woman named Janet Siebold was jogging around the desolate road of County Route 1181 when she noticed a little body in seafoam green fabric lying in the high, dead weeds. As Amy Mihaljevic was last seen in a seafoam green sweatsuit, and Janet was familiar with that detail having seen the story in the news, she was pretty sure she had just found Amy. She immediately ran to the nearest farmhouse and called 911. The area quickly swarmed with police and FBI who blocked off the road and secured the scene. Though her body was very badly decomposed, it was clear to investigators that the remains they had found were Amy Mihaljevic's. The search was over, but now Bay Village Police and the FBI had to break the horrible news to the Mihaljevics. Amy had been found, but she wasn't alive. Chapter 5. What happened to Amy? At the crime scene, which was located about a 70-minute drive from the Bay Square shopping mall, investigators found a beige blanket and a homemade green curtain that looked to have been repurposed out of a quilt. Both items lay about 300 feet from Amy's body, and investigators surmised it was possible she'd been wrapped in them when her abductor dumped her body. While she was dressed, the black boots, turquoise horse stud earrings, and white bracelet she'd last been seen wearing were missing. Her sweatsuit also had several gold fibers on them that investigators later determined came from the carpet of a GM vehicle produced between 1975 and 1978. As she was taken for an autopsy, the gold fibers were bagged for later testing, along with the blanket and curtain. Amy's school bag was also recovered from the scene, and though her books were still inside, several smaller items were found missing, as well as a sleek black leather folder with a brass clasp emblazoned with a Buick logo. The folder was a gift from Amy's father, one he had been given from his job at the General Motors Company. The fact that it would have only been given to employees made it a rare folder, and something police felt was significant in that the abductor had kept it. If they found any suspects with that kind of folder in their possession, it would certainly pique their interest. After being taken for an autopsy, it was discovered that Amy's underwear had been put on inside out and had a blood stain on them, leading the coroner to believe Amy's abductor had sexually assaulted her and redressed her. Her cause of death was ruled as multiple small stab wounds to the neck that had cut the main artery, causing her to bleed to death. She also had blunt force trauma to the head, resulting in a brain bleed. The autopsy revealed Amy had been killed a few hours after she'd been taken, as there was undigested Chinese food in her stomach, leading investigators to believe that her killer fed her at the mall before taking her somewhere to assault and murder her. It was estimated that she was dumped on the field off Highway 1181 only a few days after being killed. The fact that her parents hadn't been contacted with a ransom, and no one interviewed in those critical first days could offer up anyone who'd want to hurt Amy or the Mihaljevic family, investigators assumed that this was not someone who was close to Amy or her family, and instead was a sexual predator. But who was this man? It's a question that still haunts law enforcement to this day. Chapter 6. The continued search for a child killer. Over the past 35 years, both Bay Village Police and the FBI have worked tirelessly to find out who abducted and murdered Amy on that fateful October afternoon in 1989. Unfortunately, though they were able to whittle the suspect pool down to around 20 persons of interest, no conclusive evidence has ever been found definitively tying anyone to Amy's murder. But some clues have come out over the years that will hopefully bring Amy's killer to justice one day. In 2006, investigators found out that Amy hadn't been the only girl in the Bay Village area to have received phone calls from a strange man. Several girls who lived in North Olmsted, a town only a short distance outside of Bay Village, had also been targeted by a man on the phone. And he told those girls that he needed help buying a gift for their parents. Interestingly, several of these girls had unlisted phone numbers, though the running theory is that their phone numbers had been obtained from the logbook of the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center, as all the girls from North Olmsted who received the calls had visited and signed the guest book at the center. Likewise, Amy and her family were frequent visitors to the Nature Center, and Amy too had left her phone number in the logbook at one time. Though this was groundbreaking information, there's been no public knowledge about whether or not Amy had anything else in common with these girls from North Olmsted. This doesn't mean there aren't any additional connections between Amy Mihaljevic and these calls to other girls, but if there are other links, they've been kept from the public. The FBI also created a profile on the killer along with a sketch based on the eyewitness accounts from Amy's classmates who had been at the mall and seen Amy that day. According to the FBI, Amy's killer was a white male between the ages of 30 and 35, between 5'8" and 5'10", and of medium build. At the time she was abducted, this man was said to be unremarkable in appearance and would have looked presentable but not accomplished or professional. Based on over 10 years of acquired evidence and profiling, the FBI described him as socially marginalized and unable to fit in well with his peers, particularly female peers. People who knew him may have described him as difficult or someone who acted oddly. They theorized that he was someone who lived alone, or maybe was residing with his parents. But he was not someone living the typical white picket fence American life with a spouse, 2 children, and a dog. Profilers also believed Amy's killer had gone through some kind of personality or behavioral snap not long before abducting Amy. They described it as something drastic that family or close relations would have noticed. Examples given are starting or ending a drug habit, sudden heavy drinking or sudden abstention if he was a drinker, a new radical fascination with a cult or religious group, or the sudden onset of a mental health issue like obsessive-compulsive disorder or depression following a catastrophic life event. Profilers also believe that Amy's killer was not a transient passerby. His extensive knowledge of the locations, phone numbers, and logistics of Amy's schedule show that he was either a resident of Bay Village or worked as a delivery person or contractor who had reason to know the area. Likewise, the placement of Amy's body off Route 1181 shows that he spent a lot of time on that highway, and he knew the exact place where he could dump her body so that a long time would pass before someone would find it. They also believe that Amy's killer was familiar with the Mihaljevic family in some fashion, since he seemed to know so many personal details. What makes Amy's killer so particularly hard to catch is that, as far as the FBI knows, there have been no other abductions or murders like Amy's in the area using the same phone call ruse. They surmise that Amy's killer may have changed his technique as technological advances with phones created instant caller ID, but without a pattern of similar behavior, there's no one from the suspect pool who can definitively be pointed to. The FBI has determined that in 70% of cases like Amy's, there are unknown witnesses with vital information that could lead to the killer's arrest. This includes women who may have been sexually assaulted by the perpetrator who never reported it, females who felt uncomfortable in his presence but never said anything, or even family and neighbors who noticed odd behavior or change in personality. Perhaps they knew he had a vehicle with a yellow carpet, or they noticed a man in his 30s with jewelry belonging to a young girl. Perhaps someone noticed him with the sleek black folder from Amy's backpack. Likewise, the curtain found with Amy's body was very unique, and the FBI have posted photos of it in several articles, hoping someone would recognize it and be able to give information on where it came from. While memories have faded in the past 35 years, Law enforcement still urges anyone who may remember something about a man fitting this profile to contact the FBI with their recollections. Chapter 7. New Findings. In 2016, investigators sent several hairs found on the blanket and curtain from the crime scene to be tested. They came back as Amy's hair and fur from the Mihalijevic family dog, which solidified the theory that Amy's killer had wrapped her in these items before dumping her, allowing her hair and that of her dog to be transferred from her clothes. But technology was still not far enough along for investigators to feel safe sending small DNA samples from Amy's clothing to be tested. They feared it would degrade or be destroyed and not be able to be tested when further advancements had been made. In 2020, a potential new suspect was brought to police attention. The ex-girlfriend of a 64-year-old man came forward to tell police that she'd been dating this publicly unidentified man at the time of Amy's abduction, and that he had been uncharacteristically absent from their home the day Amy was abducted. And he had been in close proximity to the Bay Square shopping center around the time Amy went missing. He was employed in Bay Village and had a niece who was Amy's age and went to her school. He also allegedly called his girlfriend the evening after the abduction, inquiring if she'd seen the news. Investigators took this tip seriously, interviewing the man on several occasions, as well as taking his DNA and giving him a polygraph test, which he allegedly failed. A warrant was also granted to police to search a storage unit in the man's name. The search of the storage locker led to several items being confiscated. Likewise, a background search into the ownership records of the man's vehicles showed that he owned a vehicle around the time of Amy's abduction with a carpet similar to the fibers around the crime scene. In addition, a vehicle of a similar make and model to the car he owned in 1989 when Amy was killed was witnessed parked near the dump site of Amy's body on Route 1181 in February 1990. But at this time, no arrest has been made since there isn't conclusive evidence to make any arrests. As of 2023, several samples from Amy's clothes were sent to the lab, but unfortunately, the samples were too small and too degraded to create a suspect profile. But there's still the blanket and curtain. Samples from these were sent to the lab in October of 2023, and investigators hope there will be enough DNA to create a forensic profile of the suspect. But for now, Amy's killer remains at large. Chapter 8. Amy's Legacy. While her family still hopes for justice all these years later, they haven't been sitting idly by. Her mother, Margaret, co-founded the Community Fund for Assisting Missing Youth not long after Amy's murder. Sadly, the fund no longer exists, since Margaret died in 2001 from complications with alcoholism brought on by her daughter's murder. Before she died, Margaret made regular TV appearances through the fund, hoping to generate more leads in Amy's case. The fund also provided education to elementary school students about stranger danger and avoiding abduction. The town of Bay Village also hosts an annual memorial walk in Amy's honor every year on October 26th. The walk also acts as a fundraiser to build funds for the Amy Fund, which are funds the local police department uses for forensic DNA testing in Amy's continued investigation. Bay Village's goal for 2024 was to raise $10,000 to send more evidence out for testing. If any of our listeners live in the Bay Village area and would like to participate in Amy's memorial walk or make a donation, we'll have a link to the sign up in our show notes. Chapter 9. Call to Action. Amy Mihaljevic's case is still open and active. The FBI and the Bay Village police are still hoping for a break, and any tip or piece of information could be the key to finally arresting her killer. If any of our listeners know anything that could potentially help in Amy's case, we ask that you contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Bay Village Police Department at 440-871-1234. For our listeners looking to learn more about Amy's case, her story has been covered by several media outlets. We invite you to check out some of them. The book Amy, My Search for Her Killer by James Renner, the documentary The Lake Erie Murders, Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, and Dateline's episode, Unforgettable, What Happened to Amy. We hope that by telling her story here, Amy's case will reach more people who might have potential information to crack her case. We encourage you to share this episode to give it a wider audience, and spread the word to help bring Amy's killer to justice once and for all. Audience invitation. Is there a case or an unexplained communication you'd like us to cover? Please take the time to rate and review this show, and in your comments, tell us what case you'd like us to tackle. You can also follow us and reach us on social media. We're on x.com at KillerCPod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KillerCommunicationsPodcast. And be sure to check out our website, KillerCommunicationspodcast.com. Killer Communications listeners, if you want to support this show and get access to things like ad-free listening, early release episodes, and any bonus content, consider supporting us with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts. For $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, your AbJack Insider subscription will not only unlock all of these great benefits for this show, but for every podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcasts. Get your AbJack Insider subscription started with a free trial. Simply head over to Apple Podcasts and search for AbJack Entertainment, and you'll find the option to set up and unlock your subscription and start enjoying all the benefits of being a subscriber. We'll also include a link in the show notes. Your support is greatly appreciated. Just a heads up, new episodes of Killer Communications air every other Saturday. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Killer Communications.
Killer Communications is narrated and produced by Mike Morford for AbJack Entertainment. It's researched and written by Abagail Belcastro. Be sure to visit the show's website, KillerCommunicationspodcast.com, for past episodes, social media links, show news, and more.